Hello, my name's Andrew, and today we're talking about the similarities between Paul Saladino and his business partner Brian Johnson, aka the Liver King, and what it can teach us about natural health. So at first glance, it's actually bizarre that Paul Saladino is in business with the Liver King because they seem really different. Like on the one hand, you've got Paul, who's a doctor, and he's always quoting studies, and he sounds reasonable, and then you've got the Liver King, who was recently arrested for threatening Joe Rogan, and he was pretending to eat liver all the time when in fact he was just taking steroids. But when you kind of look under the hood of both of these people, you can see that they're thinking about nutrition and sort of life in general is very similar. For the Liver King, or I guess more accurately, the Steroids King, it just seemed like he was constantly hyping himself up to like cartoonish levels of energy, you know? And because of course it's impossible to maintain those levels of energy naturally, he had to resort to drugs, steroids, but also psychedelics, which kept this fake personality pumped up for a time. But eventually he just imploded, you know, like a hot air balloon because he got caught for using steroids. And now it's really sad because his life is over. It just seems like he was really abusing psychedelics and steroids, and he looks like a heroin user. He looks like someone that you would find out on the street under a piece of cardboard. And like, this is what money and social media does to people. When you chase those things, you just end up going crazy. You burn yourself out. But while Paul hasn't gone to those extremes yet, you can see that he's on the same exact trajectory as the Liver King, except instead of steroids and psychedelics, he's leaning on sugar in order to maintain this fake ultra high level personality. Now, when I made the first video about Paul, I just saw it as a one-off and I thought I'd move on to other stuff. But I went down this rabbit hole the other day with raw honey because I've been getting it from Whole Foods from this brand called Really Raw, and it comes in a plastic container. So I was like, well, this isn't ideal. So what else is out there? And there's some brands that sold like Manuka honey, but it's sort of medicinal and really expensive. And there wasn't much else out there. So actually one of the brands that I found was on Paul Saladino's site. And yeah, it was expensive, but you know, he's lab testing it, so that's awesome. But then I just got curious about like how much raw honey Paul Saladino is eating every day, because a lot of times in his videos he'll show himself eating entire spoonfuls. And so I found a page on his site where he lists everything that he's eating, and not only is Paul Saladino eating 10 tablespoons of raw honey per day, he's also eating fruit and raw dairy, and when you add it all up, it's 200 grams of sugar per day. Now, even the most sugar heavy animals hardly come close to this, with the exception of maybe like hummingbirds if you're accounting for the difference in body weight. And then on top of that, I started adding up the weight of everything he's eating, and the crazy thing is that even though the dude is claiming to be an animal-based expert, he's eating almost 50% vegan. But back to the sugar, you have to ask yourself, like, for someone who wrote the Carnivore Code, claimed that it was like the greatest diet ever, why does he suddenly need this massive amount of sugar? Well, it's like what we were talking about at the beginning of the video. Paul is just constantly hyping him up to this supernatural level of energy with his ultra intense workouts and his constantly posting social media videos. And so it's obvious that his body just can't keep up with his metabolic needs, and the only way that he can meet those needs is just by eating pure sugar. A really helpful way to think about this is like building a fire, and traditional Chinese medicine has been using this a long time to explain digestion. But essentially, if you're thinking about how to start a fire, you might start with some twigs, which could be fruit, and then, I don't know, if you want to start it very quickly, you'd pour some lighter fluid on there, right, which makes this huge whoosh. And the lighter fluid is sugar. You know, your body can metabolize it almost instantly into energy, at which point you could start throwing some larger sticks and then some logs on there, which would be like high-fat animal-based. And if you just leave it alone for a little while, you've got this nice gentle rising of energy, and then it's steady and it's steady and it's steady, and you could just put more logs on it, right? Because you've got strong digestion, strong fire. But essentially what Paul is doing with his high-sugar diet is just constantly pouring gasoline, you know, lighter fluid onto the fire. And if you imagine seeing this in real life, you would just look at the person, you're like, dude, what are you doing? You've got this great fire going. Why are you continuing to pour gasoline on it? And well, we all know where this story ends. It ends with the Liver King, and with a fire, it ends with just having a bunch of char and ash. It ends with completely burning yourself out for no reason whatsoever. Like, if Paul was struggling financially, you know, just trying to put food on the table, I would totally understand whipping himself with sugar. But the dude is raking in millions of dollars per year, so there's no need whatsoever for him to continue doing this, other than the fact that he's just obsessed with money and social media fame. Honestly, the only reason I'm saying this is because I've recognized the same pattern in myself at lots of times in my life. Whether it's sugar or social media or drugs, whenever I find myself needing to have a ton of something, it's always because I've got myself attached or addicted to something like social media stats or earning more money. And again, it always ends in the same place, which is chronic burnout and depression. Of course, you always have the decision to turn your life around, to get more rest, to do things that are less stressful to your body. But if you just keep whipping your body with sugar, steroids, psychedelics, creatine, supplements, stress, you end up looking and acting like the Liver King, just completely burned out. Now, if you're thinking, but Andrew, there are all these studies about how stressing your body makes you live longer, you know, ice baths and building a ton of body mass and having a super low body fat index. But I'm telling you, you cannot find a single wild animal, a single indigenous human who behaves this way, who works out this hard for no reason whatsoever, who eats this much sugar when they have much more reliable sources of food around, who chases attention and other resources far past the point of what they need to live. You know, for the most part, wild animals or wild humans will go out and hunt or gather, and then they'll just rest. They'll just enjoy their lives because they know that's the only thing that's going to make them live longer. So basically, the lesson for today is observe nature, see how wild animals behave, and just chill. And that's the key to being the king of happiness, not sugar. So thank you guys for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.